There's several machine shops, but like nobody runs a machine shop in Central Washington, not in Ellensburg. There is a, Yakima Grindings down in Yakima, but they just do the machining. They don't do any assembly. They don't do custom motor building. So like when it comes to a customer's need for a Duramax or a Power Stroke or a Cummins, if they want something built, yeah. Here we've got a 11 to 16 block for a Duramax LML. These motors are prone to breaking crankshafts. So in this motor here, you can see this is a Cali's aftermarket forged crankshaft, and these are all keywayed. This one is actually for a tow truck we have in our arsenal, and this is an LB7. Minor differences. They're really hard to spot unless you've been building these or working on them for a long time. But the crankshafts in the LB7s are actually way better than the LML factory cranks. So this is a factory crank, stock horsepower. We actually end up sending these all the way halfway across the country to Wagler. Takes a while to get them back, but they do a really good job. They come back painted. I mean, they do a really phenomenal job on decking the blocks. These ones are both bored over 20 thousandths. And then we've got kind of our own recipe for the internals of these things because we've seen so many factory failures. Duramaxes, 01 to 04s, they tend to crack pistons, but the crankshafts are good. So we upgrade the pistons to a Mall Motorsport. These pistons are shaved down 10 thousandths. That way when we shave the block and then the heads are machined, we can still install these, and we're shooting for that 12 thousandths, what they call piston protrusion. So we don't want it any more than 12 thousandths above the deck, because that means it's going to be pushing up into where the gasket would compress around there. There's a lot of little tricks and tips on these Duramaxes. Like all of our in-house long blocks, we build all of ours with ARP. These are ARP main studs, and they've got the side bolts as well. And then we also run ARP connecting rod bolts and ARP head studs. That way, all of those are reusable. The factory GM rod bolts, these are about $16 a piece, and they're a one-time use. And you have 32 of these. Once you torque that thing down and measure your bearing spec, technically you've already stretched the bolt, so you're supposed to replace those. We want this thing to be serviceable. We've pulled apart aftermarket engines before from different manufacturers, remanufacturers, and found a crack in a cylinder head. Instead of actually replacing the cylinder head, they'll drill it and install a plug. Not impressive. We tore apart a Cummins not that long ago from a pretty well-known remanufacturer, and they had actually cut this down, the journal, for the connecting rod, and they undersized the bearing. That's not an issue if you run all the same size, but they had 3 different sizes of bearings. No reputable machine shop's going to take a crankshaft like that and size them 4 different ways. Cutting corners, and it's giving a crap product to your customer. There are a lot of little things we're doing to these engines to make sure they're perfect. We don't want to cheap out on gaskets or bolts or anything else on them.